Well, good morning, 6:30, Friday, August 27th. Can't believe September is right around the corner. Labor Day will be fastly approaching. Should be a pretty beautiful day, as we'll find out soon with Ken's weather report. But this week's code of conduct is to drive safely, defensively, and courteously. It's a very important code item of us. It's a high exposure that we have with all the miles that we put on to and from job sites, to and from getting to work. So please try to really follow the rules of the road. Take your time. Again, there's been an uptick in auto accidents in the state. I don't know what the count is, but I think the last time I saw there's over 40 fatalities in the state of Vermont regarding auto accidents. So it's a very dangerous task. So something that you really need to focus in on, really making sure there's no distractions, giving yourself ample time to maneuver, and always focusing on the task at hand. So this week, we went another 7 days without a recordable injury. So please, got another hot mic out there, so please mute yourself, whoever just joined. Again, continue with the best practices of pre-planning, focusing on our task at hand, communicating the task at hand that we're trying to accomplish today, and go through our kind of known or expected hazards and how we're going to mitigate those hazards through the hierarchy of controls. And lastly, just making sure everybody's wearing that PPE. Contact health and safety. If there's any kind of unique situations that you might need some guidance or might have questions on, we're here to help mitigate any hazards on your job sites. To wrap up our sling inspections, I just want to quickly talk about the cable. We talked about synthetics and chain the last 2 weeks, and this week I just wanted to talk about cables. So what we're looking for with our cables is some of these kind of permanent kinking. You got these permanent dog legs that occur, bird caging, severe wear. Again, it's 10% wear when we're talking about cable slings. Broken wires, which we'll talk in more depth on the next slide. Corrosion or really rusting is what we're looking for there. Damage to any of the components, any of the fittings. And then if we're missing any tags. So if you're missing a tag on a cable sling and you're using it for overhead material lifting, for picking overhead, we need to make sure that is being tagged out of service. If you're starting to see some of the bird caging and kicking, as long as the strands are evenly displaced, we're allowed to kind of keep those in service, but it's a first identifier that we need to keep an eye on it, because as soon as it starts being displaced unevenly, that now cable sling is compromised and we should take it out of service. One thing that I've learned from Jim Laughlin over the last couple of years, or earlier in my career when Jim was still with us, was, again, when in doubt, let's take it out of service. Let's not push our life-saving equipment and major components with our cranes and our excavators when we're doing some of these bigger, heavy picks. And that's normally what we see when we're using cable slings. It's we're picking heavy weight. And the last criteria for cables is identifying the broken wires. We're allowed to have some, but not many. I apologize. I kind of blew this picture out a little bit, so it's a little bit blurry. But we're allowed to have 5 broken wires in one strand and 10 broken wires in one lay. So as you can see, one lay is 1 revolution of a strand around the core. You're allowed to have 10. If you count 10 in that lay, you need to take it out of service. And if you see 5 broken wires in one strand in 1 revolution around the core, we should be taking these out of service. So again, if you have questions, take pictures, send them to me, or just let me know and I'll come make a site visit. This over the next couple of weeks, I'll be doing more cable inspections as we're wrapping up our chain inspections this week. So it's very important. Again, best rigging techniques is knowing your weight, and understanding and doing those inspections prior to any lifting of the day, any picking. So, with that said, Ken, if you have anything to add, feel free to add at this point in time, and we'll kick it over to you.
I'll unmute here. Yeah, it doesn't sound, I'm surprised at the 5 broken wires. I think we need to verify that for next week. And 10 per lay.
Okay. Yep.
Let's check that out. Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'll put up my screen here. Let's see, Windows. Okay, here we go. Does it show up?
So far, blank screen.
Blank screen.
Oh, there it goes. Now it's popped.
Okay. Okay. So for announcements, if you ordered fare tickets, then look for them in last week's paycheck. And also, we still need to get a few of the declaration of healthcare forms. So if you haven't, you'll probably be getting a call. So you should get in front of that, get ahead of it, and get it prepared and ready and submit it over to the accounting department before you get that call. There's a link here if you need it. I think there's forms on Scott Burns's counter, and probably check with the accounting department too. So this week school is back in session, so we want to be cautious. Watch for school bus stops. Watch for kids crossing. There should be more going on out there, and especially at the hours we'd be traveling back and forth to the job sites. So I posted here the Vermont statute for operation of vehicles and special stops required. This is about passing school buses. There's essentially 2 points to it. First of all, you have to stop if they're appropriately signaled school bus, and you have to stop immediately and keep your vehicle stationary while the flashing red signals are in operation. The other part of it is kind of an exemption that talks about a divided highway. So if there's a separation in the highway where pedestrians can't cross, then you're not required and typically wouldn't stop. In fact, you might get rear-ended if you stopped in cases like that. So the point there is that if it's on the other side of a divided highway, you don't need to stop. For the wellness plan, I got a link here again. So if you have any questions, go to the link, call Champlain Medical, or check with one of us. Weather update. As Matt said, we're coming into a cooler condition, a little bit of warmer, milder air on Monday, but beyond that, it's going to stay cool. COVID policies, we're up to 85.9% vaccinated, and we have no new changes on the COVID policies. And for this week's project, I'm profiling the 10th anniversary of Tropical Storm Irene on August 28, 2011. It struck Vermont. So it's the 10th anniversary. It's pretty amazing that it's been 10 years already. And the storm dumped up to 11 inches of rain. It was a devastating event that took several years to recover from. And the most extreme damage occurred in the steep river and stream valleys that couldn't handle the sudden volume of flow. Houses, bridges, highways, utilities were no match for the water. What happened, a lot of just the very steep valleys, the water just went right to the bottom and just tried to get out. And it tore these valleys apart pretty good. ECI was immediately called into 24/7 service by the railroads and the Vermont Agency of Transportation to stabilize and restore their service of their shuttered infrastructure. ECI also worked on a variety of emergency repairs, including Sprint and AT&T fiber lines along the rail corridors. It's just an example of some of the destruction of a roadway in this case, and obviously a good portion of the roadway and the culvert, large culvert that got torn out. And of course, we have a lot of pictures on the railroad because a lot of the work we did was on the road. And here's a grade crossing, or the edge of a grade crossing. Looks like some of the road's intact at the front of the picture, but the signal system is totally torn down, and the tracks are undermined and humped and collapsing down into a void. This was an interesting photo. The next couple, this is, don't remember the bridge number. This is in Cavendish, Vermont. In about a year or maybe 2 years, or not much more than that, we had done repairs to the bridge for VTrans in the road, and you can see fairly new concrete there. Well, the water had gone actually backed up because of debris catching on the bridge and went around the repaired abutments. The tracks got undermined, and then in this next picture you can see that some of the underlying substructure got ripped and torn out and undermined and scoured. Unfortunately, VTrans and the railroad did not elect to do a deep foundation underneath this repair that we had done. And so therefore that there was nothing, there was no piles or anything supporting the structure when the scouring occurred. A lot of places were just tracks left hanging in the air, trees down and pushing through the infrastructure. And you can see here's another example of a bridge intact up top, but you can see that it was pushed off the bearings and just deviated from the alignment. So our greatest single assignment during Irene was the Green Mountain Railroad Bridge number 114 over the Williams River in Chester, and the floodwater had undermined and washed out behind the abutments of this 112-foot long truss bridge. When we first arrived, the bridge was listing about 25 degrees from vertical and was pretty much only held up from toppling into the river by the jointed rail that extended beyond the bridge. So ECI was mobilized to the site on September 1st, and the bridge was stabilized to allow traffic in just 13 days. ECI continued on the project to perform a permanent rebuild of the abutments and track. I'll link here to the slideshow we prepared back then. But you can see what happened. This river just overflowed the banks and got backed up and scoured around the abutments, and the abutments settled or got partially torn apart. And the bridge was in a very precarious situation. There's the abutment was just ripped apart. And you can see that if it wasn't for the rail, the whole thing probably would have toppled in. So it started, like I said, it was 24/7. First thing to do to make access. And then we hired crane masters. We brought in our own crane, plus we had crane masters. They're a specialty kind of a recovery kind of salvage contractor with big heavy cranes, and they helped lift the bridge back into position. We ended up driving sheeting and then piling for the new foundations. Driving through the bridge, that was interesting, right through the bridge to get to a new foundation. The bridge was eventually shifted over to that new foundation where the piles are. So bridge was actually moved to the east, like about 15 or 20 feet. And you mentioned Jim Laughlin earlier, Matt. That's it's hard to tell, but that's Jim in that 308. And then a couple of familiar faces here doing some of the repair to the abutment on the west side. You can see that the bearings just hanging there in the air. Everything was stabilized at that point. The chain is hooked to a crane, one of the big salvage cranes. And a lot of concrete work, of course. And then 13 days later, the temporary shoring and posting of everything, we were able to get the trains across, got the tracks back together and everything to allow us to do the permanent work. And it's a cool picture here. Most of the crews that worked on that repair, mostly ECI people there. There's probably a flagger, and some of the VHB guys were on site. Actually, they're on site with a little temporary office. So we all got together for a group photo. And then from the photo archives, I just wanted to point out that Irene was not the only extreme weather event in 2011. As you may recall, there was a record high Lake Champlain water level on May 6th, and that was 103.2. And this picture was a flight over the Sandbar Causeway, and that it really is a pretty extreme and dramatic picture to show. Of course, that was in the spring, no leaves on the trees yet. But Matt, you travel this daily. I mean, is that pretty extreme or what?
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think that the water was over the road there.
Yeah, it was pretty much entirely across the road. I believe, and there's a string of cars there that they were able to cross one lane at a time through some water.
Yeah, so that's kind of after Bear Trap, right as you're going through the wetlands. And the
That's
top of the picture is actually when you're crossing
right.
from Keeler Bay or the Inland Sea in
Right. That's where the
Mallett's
state
Bay.
park is, that little triangle at the top of the page.
Oh, yeah, yeah, perfect. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that little curve there, it's amazing.
Yep. So that's what I got. Hopefully we won't see any extreme weather like this again in our lifetimes. But you never know. All right, well, have a good day out there. Be safe. Fortunately, we get some cooler weather to work a little more comfortably.
Yep. Thanks, Ken, and please,
Okay.
if you participated in the crowd, thanks for the 50 people that tuned in. Just please kick me information on who attended it with you so we can have a good attendance record of today's meeting. Be safe. Have a great day.
Okay. Thanks. See you later.
Bye.